They tore his ticket in half before he even sat down. No explanation, no apology, just a smirk, a sideways glance, and the words, "This seat isn't for you." 3 hours later, the world would know exactly who he was. But on that plane, in that moment, he was just a black kid with quiet eyes, holding something in his lap they didn't bother to ask about. They thought he was alone. They thought he wouldn't speak. What they didn't know is that they had just handed him the microphone. If you're watching this, remember, this isn't fiction. This happened. And the next 10 minutes will show you how far one child had to fall before someone decided to look up. Hit like if you feel something. Subscribe if you're ready for stories that hit different. And tell me, where are you watching from? And when would you have stood up? Jordan Miles stepped onto the aircraft with quiet purpose, gripping his boarding pass like it was the only thing tethering him to the ground. At 13, he was shorter than most around him, but held himself with the composed stiffness of someone used to walking into places where people didn't expect him. His hoodie was clean, his shoes worn but cared for, and in his left hand he held a small wooden box, smooth and polished, the only item he hadn't let go of since the airport gate. As he entered the first-class cabin, his eyes flicked to the seat map on the bulkhead, then directly to the second row, seat A, the window seat he had chosen intentionally, because his sister always liked sitting by the window. That was the plan. That was what the ticket said. 2A, first class, purchased weeks ago, confirmed again that morning by his guardian, approved by the airline's official letter for unaccompanied minor special clearance. Everything was in place. As he reached the row, he glanced down at the seat, took a breath, and began to place the wooden box gently on the cushion. That's when a voice sliced through the cabin, sharp, rehearsed, and saturated with artificial politeness. "Excuse me, sweetheart, I don't think you're supposed to be here." The woman speaking wore a navy blue blazer with gold stripes on her shoulders. Her blonde hair twisted into a bun, so tight it looked painful. Her name tag read Clayton. Jordan looked up slowly, not startled, but cautious. "This is 2A, he replied, lifting his boarding pass for her to see. "It's my seat, MS." Clayton's smile didn't move. She took the ticket with fingers that seemed too eager, glanced at it briefly, then flipped open her tablet. "Hold on 1 second, she muttered, tapping rapidly, her eyes flicking back and forth between the device and the boy in front of her. Jordan waited, his shoulders squared, trying not to tighten his grip on the box. He had been warned about adults like her, about their tone, about their eyes. MS. Clayton exhaled sharply, then looked at him again, this time with less politeness and more disbelief. "This seat's been reassigned," she said flatly. "That can't be right," Jordan answered, confusion creeping into his voice. "I checked in, I got the tag, and the system made an adjustment," she interrupted. "You've been moved to another seat. Please collect your things." Jordan didn't move. "What seat?" he asked, voice quieter now. "MS." Clayton's smile vanished. "Coach." The word landed like a slap. Before Jordan could respond, a white man in a gray wool suit appeared behind her. He was balding, ruddy-faced, and holding a leather duffel bag that probably cost more than Jordan's entire trip. "Mr. Langston, MS." Clayton said brightly, her voice a sudden melody. "I'm so sorry for the wait. We had a minor mix-up, but your seat is ready." She turned back to Jordan without looking him in the eyes. "Now if you'll kindly step aside, we can get him settled." "But this is my seat," Jordan insisted, louder this time. "It's on my ticket, MS." Clayton's lips tightened. In one swift, deliberate motion, she took the boarding pass from Jordan's hand, tore it cleanly down the middle, and dropped the pieces into the waste bin by the galley. "You'll receive a new one at the back," she said calmly. "Let's not hold up the line." Passengers in first class glanced up from their newspapers, tablets, and champagne glasses. Some frowned. Others barely looked. Jordan stared at the torn ticket like it was part of him that had just been ripped. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. No one came to his defense. No one stood up. MS. Clayton motioned toward the aisle. "Let's go." Jordan picked up the wooden box with 2 hands, holding it close to his chest like a shield, and began walking. Each step down the narrow aisle felt heavier than the last. The air felt colder. Near row 6, a woman whispered to her husband, "I told you they sneak up here all the time." In row 9, a teenager chuckled under his breath. When Jordan finally reached row 27, he slid into the seat closest to the bathroom, knees tight to the seat in front of him, overhead vents hissing down on his head. He set the box on his lap and stared at the seat in front of him, silent. Back in first class, Mr. Langston stretched his legs, cracked his neck, and ordered a scotch before takeoff. MS. Clayton wiped her hands on her uniform and smiled as if she had done something righteous. The intercom chimed. "Cabin doors will close in 2 minutes. Please take your seats." Jordan didn't cry. He didn't blink. He just sat there, eyes glassy, knuckles white against the smooth edges of the box. The seat he had reserved, paid for, now held someone else. And no one even asked his name. Jordan sat stiffly in seat 27E, the cold leather pressing into his back as the hiss of the cabin fan echoed above. The air smelled of plastic and disinfectant. His hands clutched the wooden box tighter than before, and though the seatbelt sign had turned off, he didn't move. Not an inch. Just 6 rows ahead, the nearest lavatory door swung open and shut every few minutes, and each time it did, the smell of stale air and chemicals wafted over him. A child 2 seats away turned to his mother and asked loudly, "Why is that kid hugging a lunchbox like it's alive?" The mother gave a quick glance, then leaned in and whispered something, shielding her mouth with her magazine. Jordan heard the word, troubled. A teenage boy in the aisle across took out his phone, angled the camera, and hit record. "Yo, check it," he whispered to his friend. "Kid got kicked outta first for trying to sit where he don't belong. Got a whole funeral box and everything." The phone screen flashed with a filter and a caption. "First class faker, #dead wrong." Jordan turned his head slightly, but said nothing. His face remained blank, but inside, the words were burning. Behind him, a man coughed without covering his mouth, then muttered, "Damn kids think everything belongs to them now." The words landed like stones on Jordan's back. His hands shifted along the top of the box, brushing against the edge where her name had once been engraved, Maya. Now faded, worn from too much touching, too many flights, too much silence. A flight attendant passed his row, pushing a metal cart that clanked with cups and aluminum trays. She handed drinks to passengers around him, ginger ale, soda, even mini bottles of wine, but skipped his row entirely. When Jordan raised a hand, she didn't look. He hesitated, then called out gently, "Ma'am." The cart stopped. She turned. "Yes." "Could I get a bottle of water?" he asked quietly. She blinked at him, her lips thinning. "You'll have to wait until service in your section. This cart is for main cabin plus." Then she pushed forward without another word. Jordan's lips parted slightly, but he said nothing, just turned back to the seat in front of him, letting his head lean into the stiff cushion. The teen across the aisle smirked. "Yo, even the drinks ain't for you, little man." Jordan didn't react, but the grip on the box tightened. 1 row up, a girl giggled into her phone screen. "We got a weirdo back here." He looked over at Jordan with subtle discomfort, shifted his seat slightly, and angled his body away. A child in the next row pointed at the box and asked, "Is there something inside that's dead?" The mother didn't answer. She just stared forward and whispered, "Just don't make eye contact." Jordan shut his eyes and pictured Maya's face, her laugh, her sneakers tapping down school hallways, the text she sent him a week before she died. "Save me a window seat next time." He had. He tried. And now, too, it belonged to a man who hadn't even looked twice at the boy he'd replaced. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude. Beverage service will continue shortly. Thank you for flying with us." Jordan opened his eyes and looked down at the box again. He whispered so low only he could hear it, "I'm sorry." The words hung there, heavy. He couldn't tell if they were meant for her or for himself. Then another bottle bounced off his tray. It rolled and clinked into the aisle. The teen who had been filming leaned forward, tossing another empty cap toward Jordan's feet. "Hey box boy, what's in there anyway? Leftovers from your sob story." Jordan looked up, slowly. The boy smirked and raised his phone again. "Come on." Say something for the camera. Cry a little. Give us a show. Jordan's mouth twitched. For the briefest moment, something stirred in his eyes. Not rage, not defiance, just cracks. His composure was breaking slowly, like glass under pressure. A soft, almost imperceptible shudder ran through his shoulders. The teen leaned in closer, still filming. What's wrong, 2A reject? Miss your first-class peanuts. A voice from behind cut through. Hey, cut out. Everyone turned. A man, middle-aged, calm, voice low but commanding, stood near the aisle, arms crossed. That kid's done nothing to you, he said. Leave him alone. The teen scoffed, but the phone lowered. Jordan looked back down at the box. His voice, almost soundless, murmured, she didn't get to fly home. I just wanted to give her one flight. The man didn't respond. He just sat down again. Silence returned, but not peace. Just wait. The kind that crushed slower than gravity. Jordan remained still, staring at nothing, knowing full well that the worst hadn't even come yet. The laughter from earlier still echoed in his ears, each sneer and whispered insult lodging itself deeper than the one before. The wooden box sat in his lap like a fragile heart he had sworn to protect, but with every passing second, it felt heavier, like it was dragging him down, pulling him through the floor and out of the world entirely. Across the aisle, a group of 4 teenagers, 2 boys and 2 girls, had grown bored of their phones and turned their attention elsewhere. They sat clustered around their seats like they owned the sky, their sneakers propped against seatbacks, snacks strewn across tray tables, their energy loud and thoughtless. Truth or dare, one girl said with a grin, her lip gloss shimmering beneath the overhead light. The others smirked, eyes already scanning for their next victim. Dare, one of the boys answered. She leaned in, her voice low, conspiratorial. Go ask sad boy what's in the box. Ask him if he sleeps in it too. The boy laughed, slid out of his seat, and strutted into the aisle with a confidence that came from never being told no. He approached Jordan's row, leaned over the seat, and tapped the top of the wooden box. Hey man, he said, voice mocking. You gonna tell us what this is? Or do we need to guess? Is it a trophy? A cursed object? Maybe your little voodoo thing. He laughed, then turned back to his friends, who were already recording. Jordan didn't look up. His hands didn't move. The boy grew bolder. Come on, say something. Tell us who you are. Why you thought first class was for you. One of the girls called out. Bet you cried when they moved you. Bet your mommy's waiting at the gate to sue someone. Jordan slowly lifted his head. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes flickered, faint, but dangerous. Please leave me alone, he said, his voice steady, low, but carrying more weight than they expected. The boy raised his hands in mock surrender. Okay. Chill, bro. No need to get spooky. He turned back, laughing, and muttered under his breath, freak. As he returned to his seat, Jordan exhaled slowly, quietly, trying to will away the sting crawling through his chest. A few moments passed in tense silence, until another passenger, a woman in her 40s with a designer bag and loud perfume, stood up and walked to the lavatory. On her way back, she paused beside Jordan, looked down, and wrinkled her nose. Excuse me, she said to the flight attendant nearby, I don't think it's sanitary for objects like that to be left out. Shouldn't he put it in the overhead bin or something? The attendant glanced at Jordan, then at the box. It's permitted, she said, but her voice was unsure. He has the right to keep it with him. Even if it makes others uncomfortable, the woman pressed, crossing her arms. Jordan stared at the floor, his grip tightening. It's my sister, he whispered, though no one was really listening. It's not a box. It's her. The flight attendant blinked, uncertain how to respond. The woman scoffed and walked away muttering, this is why some people shouldn't fly alone. A man behind Jordan leaned over to his wife and whispered, is this what air travel is now? They'll let anyone on board these days. She nodded silently, her hand already scrolling through the latest headlines, pretending she wasn't complicit in the atmosphere of cruelty hanging over them all. Jordan closed his eyes again, his arms wrapped around the box like it was the only thing tethering him to what was left of himself. His heartbeat echoed in his ears, growing louder, heavier, until it blurred into the sound of jet engines. One more voice rose from the front of the cabin, another teenager, laughing. "Betty thinks he's in a movie or something. Bro's gonna stand up and monologue." "Nah," someone else responded. "He's gonna snap. You watch." The word snap stuck in the air. Jordan opened his eyes slowly. Something inside him shifted. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. But the way he inhaled, deep, sharp, controlled, wasn't the breath of a child. It was the breath of something else. The wall that kept him calm was cracking, not with noise, but with silence. Something was breaking, and no one around him noticed. The box remained in his lap like an anchor he could not put down, a weight he wasn't strong enough to carry anymore, but also too afraid to release. The teasing had subsided not because they grew tired of it, but because now they had enough material, enough video clips, enough whispered punchlines, enough damage done. The quiet that followed was not peace. It was absence, a hollow space where something once lived, but had been scraped clean. The boy who had stepped onto the plane with a small spark of hope, who had imagined one silent moment by the window seat he and his sister once dreamed of, was now sitting in seat 27E like a passenger inside his own skin. The teenager across the aisle who had mocked him earlier now had earbuds in, bobbing his head to music. The woman with the perfume was asleep against the bulkhead. The flight attendant passed by again, offering pretzels and soda. She skipped his row, either intentionally or from habit, but either way, it didn't matter. Jordan didn't lift his hand. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His throat felt like it had dried shut. He reached slowly into his backpack, unzipped the front pocket, and pulled out a napkin, crumpled and half-folded, tucked between an unopened granola bar and a receipt for the airport meal he never finished. He pulled a pen from the other pocket, clicked it once, then again, then again. The click echoed louder than it should have. He paused. Then he began to write. The words were not neat. They came out jagged, uneven, like someone writing through a storm. "Tell Mom I tried. I sat where she asked. I kept the box safe. I didn't fight back. I didn't cry. I swear I didn't cry." He paused. The ink smudged under his hand. The pen shook slightly. He continued. "They said I didn't belong. I think maybe they're right." He stopped. His chest ached. He stared at the napkin for a long time. Then he folded it twice, carefully, and tucked it under the edge of the wooden box, pressing it between the lacquered surface and his palm. No one saw him do it. No one looked his way. Behind him, a flight attendant laughed softly at something her coworker said. A man 2 rows up cleared his throat, loudly, twice, waiting for someone to bring him a refill. In the row across, a toddler cried over an iPad game that froze mid-level. Jordan turned toward the window. He couldn't see anything. The shade was closed. The air felt thinner now. He reached up and adjusted the small nozzle overhead, but it only hissed. No cool air came out. He returned his hand to the box. It was warm now, maybe from his body, or maybe from something deeper, something he still believed was inside. His sister had always said energy doesn't die. It just moves. It shifts. He didn't know where her energy had gone, but he prayed it was close. He whispered, "I'm still here," as if she could hear it, as if she might say something back. But no reply came. Suddenly, something cold tapped his shoulder. He turned slightly, and a boy from 2 rows behind leaned forward, holding out a used soda can. "Trash?" the kid asked, wide-eyed, innocent, like it was a real question. Jordan stared. The boy blinked, confused. "Aren't you the trash guy?" The words settled like dust. Jordan didn't answer. The boy shrugged, dropped the can on Jordan's tray, and turned away. The can rolled slightly, clinking once against the metal rim. Jordan didn't touch it. His hand stayed frozen around the box. Across the cabin, a woman opened her laptop and typed rapidly. A man scrolled through a news app. A baby burped. Nothing in the world noticed him anymore. He felt smaller than he had ever felt. Smaller than the seat. Smaller than the box. He pressed his forehead against the cold plastic of the window shade, not lifting it, just needing something solid to lean against. Inside his pocket, the pen clicked again, once, twice, without purpose. just a rhythm to stay tethered to something. He didn't realize tears had welled in his eyes until one slipped past his cheek and hit the wood with a soft pat. He didn't wipe it away. He let it stay there, let it dry into the grain. Around him, the cabin felt colder, not because of temperature, but because of distance. Everyone had moved on. Everyone had resumed their lives in the air. He was just another seat to avoid looking at. When the dinner cart rattled its way through the aisle, the scent of warm bread and grilled chicken drifted into the air, and Jordan's stomach growled involuntarily. He hadn't eaten since the morning. The tray table in front of him remained down, hopeful. But when the cart stopped at his row, the flight attendant looked at him, then past him, then muttered under her breath, "No special request, no meal." Jordan blinked. "I have a meal," he said quietly. "I marked it on the form. Chicken with rice." The attendant didn't even check the list. She waved her hand. "No meal shows." "Sorry, hon." Then she moved on. Jordan stared at the empty tray table as the smell of food grew stronger around him. One row ahead, a man tore open a warm roll and dipped it into a cup of thick soup. Another popped open a can of Coke and laughed at something on his tablet. Across the aisle, the teenager who had filmed him earlier took a bite of cheesecake and licked the fork with dramatic flair. The boy moaned, eyes meeting Jordan's. "Best meal I've ever had in Coach." His friends laughed. One of them raised her phone again, started whispering in a mocking tone. "He's fasting for trauma, y'all. Let him vibe." Jordan looked away. His hands began to tremble. A few moments later, something cold and wet slapped against his forearm. He looked down. It was a half-eaten roll soaked in salad dressing, now sliding slowly down his hoodie sleeve. A plastic fork followed it, clattering against the tray table. A low chuckle came from behind. "Oops," said a voice. "Guess turbulence got me." Jordan didn't respond. He reached for a napkin, but there wasn't one. He wiped his sleeve with the inside of his shirt. The dressing left a dark smear. More laughter. Someone from 3 rows ahead turned to look back. Can someone tell that kid to control himself? He's making a mess. The flight attendant walked past again. Jordan tried to speak, but his voice caught. She saw the mess, narrowed her eyes, and handed him a crumpled napkin with 2 fingers. "Let's try to keep clean," she muttered. Jordan took it without a word. His fingers clenched it tightly before wiping down the tray. He couldn't taste the salt in his mouth. Couldn't tell if it came from food he hadn't eaten or tears he hadn't allowed himself to cry. His eyes burned. He blinked hard. The pressure behind them built. It was like trying to hold back a wave with just his palms. Then the final insult came. Not loud, not even direct, but it broke something anyway. A child 2 rows back asked her mother, "Why is that boy sitting alone?" The mother leaned in, whispered too loudly, "Because sometimes bad kids don't get to sit with the good ones." Jordan's hands froze. The crumpled napkin dropped from his fingers and landed on the floor. He stared at it. The flight attendants resumed clearing trays. No one asked if he had eaten. No one noticed his tray was empty. The overhead lights dimmed slightly as the cabin entered nighttime mode. A voice came over the intercom, soft and cheery. "Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed your meal. We'll be turning off the cabin lights shortly, so please close your windows and fasten your seatbelts. Thank you for choosing us today." Jordan did not move. He didn't fasten his seatbelt. He didn't touch the window shade. He sat perfectly still, the box in his lap, his face illuminated faintly by the seatback screen across from him. But he wasn't watching. He wasn't even seeing. In his mind, something was cracking open. Something loud. Something final. The voice in his head wasn't his anymore. It was hers. "You always hold it in too long," she had told him once, during the only fight they ever had. "One day, it's gonna crush you, Jay." He had promised her it wouldn't. That he was stronger than that. The wooden box had warmed beneath his palms, though he no longer felt it. He couldn't feel anything anymore. Not the chill. Not the pain in his back. Not even the dull hunger curling through his gut like smoke. He had stopped blinking. Ahead of him, a few passengers had reclined their seats. A baby was crying 3 rows back. Someone was watching a sitcom too loud, without headphones. The laughter from the screen clashed violently with the silence in his chest. Somewhere behind him, the teenager who had filmed him earlier whispered, "I think he's gone catatonic or something. Yo, he hasn't moved in, like, forever." One of his friends muttered, "Maybe he's writing a revenge speech in his head." Another snickered, "Maybe it's a school shooter thing. Watch him freak out." The words slipped into the air like venom. Jordan heard them, every syllable, but his eyes didn't move. His breathing barely changed. He sat like stone. Then the intercom cracked. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're cruising at 36,000 feet and currently approaching the East Coast. Our estimated arrival time into JFK is still on schedule. For those of you connecting to United Nations events, we'll be coordinating a priority gate exit at Terminal 4. Security escorts will meet designated passengers upon landing." The cabin was quiet for a moment. Then a woman nearby asked her husband, "What UN events?" The man shrugged. "Some youth conference, I think. Bunch of speakers. Heard one of the kids is some school shooting survivor. Real tragic story. From Oakland or something." The teenager across the aisle sat up straighter. "Wait, Oakland?" Another voice further back added, "Didn't they say that kid's name was Jordan something?" A third passenger chimed in, "Jordan Miles. I saw him on Good Morning America last month. He lost his sister in the shooting. Only survivor in the class." The words hung in the air like a bomb with a missing fuse. Slowly, heads began to turn. Slowly, eyes began to move. In row 27E, a boy sat clutching a wooden box. His hoodie was stained. His tray was empty. His face pale, expressionless, still. The same passengers who had laughed, recorded, and ignored him were now shifting in their seats. The teenager who had thrown the bread roll stared wide-eyed, his phone slipping slightly in his grip. The girl who had called him a freak swallowed hard and lowered her camera. The woman with the perfume now looked down into her lap. The flight attendant from earlier whispered something to her co-worker near the galley. A ripple moved through the cabin, not panic, not yet, but discomfort, guilt perhaps, or something close. One man stood, pretending to stretch, then lingered too long, glancing at Jordan's seat. Another pretended to check the overhead bin, eyes darting down at the boy like he wasn't real. And through it all, Jordan didn't move, didn't speak. The box stayed on his lap, his hands gripping it with the quiet desperation of someone holding the last piece of a body that had already bled out. A child across the aisle asked her father in a whisper, "Is he the hero boy?" The father looked unsure. "Maybe. I think so." "Why does he look so sad?" the girl asked. Her father didn't answer. Near the front of the plane, a man in a charcoal gray suit adjusted his tie and tapped something on his phone. The screen read, "Confirmed. Jordan Miles is on board. Advise full protocol upon arrival." No one noticed the message. No one knew who the man was. But the timing was not coincidence. Back in row 27, Jordan finally blinked. His eyes, dry and glassy, flicked up to the seatback screen in front of him. It had gone to sleep hours ago. He reached out, tapped it once. It lit up, showing a map of the plane's position, the blue line stretching from Atlanta to New York. A small circle labeled, "You are here," hovered near Philadelphia. Jordan stared at the dot. Then he whispered, without emotion, without inflection, "Almost there." Not as a statement of hope, but as a measurement of survival. The signal, weak but present, blinked green. The tweet posted at 9:04 p.m. Eastern. At 9:09, it had 2,300 likes. By 9:15, over 11,000 retweets. By 9:20, every major airline watchdog account had shared it. The phrase, "wrong seat, wrong kid," began trending before the plane even began its descent. Back on board, no one knew what had happened yet. But something in the cabin had changed. The girl who had filmed Jordan earlier was now scrolling through her phone, face slowly draining of color. The video she had posted of him being mocked, humiliated, pelted with food, was now swarmed with comments. Not likes, not laughter, fury. "Are you serious?" one said. You did this to Jordan Miles. This boy lost everything, and you thought he was entertainment. The teenager's finger hovered over the screen, then trembled. She tried to delete the post. Too late. Screenshots had already been saved. Comment sections exploded. Faces matched to seat numbers. The boy who had thrown the bread roll now slumped into a seat, whispering, "Oh shit. Oh shit." His friend beside him nudged him hard, hissing, "They know who we are." Across the aisle, the woman with the perfume clutched her handbag, as if it could shield her from the digital storm now brewing beyond the fuselage. She opened Facebook to find 10 new friend requests, none friendly. Her name had already been tagged in comments, her photo pulled from public albums. This woman demanded a boy put away his dead sister's ashes. Think about that. Even the flight attendants weren't spared. A crew member up front received a discreet message on her company tablet. Prepare incident statement for PR team. Executive oversight requesting full timeline. Her face went pale. She looked back at Jordan, then immediately away. The air inside the plane, once indifferent, now felt electric, charged with the static of pending judgment. Near the front, a passenger lowered his sunglasses and muttered, "You feel that? That's the internet coming for blood." One row ahead of Jordan, a businessman tried to distance himself by speaking loudly. "I didn't say anything," he declared to no one. "I didn't participate." His voice cracked. A woman beside him glared. "But you watched," she said flatly. "We all did." At that exact moment, the plane began to descend. The engines shifted pitch. The seatbelt signs chimed on. The lights dimmed slightly. The intercom activated. "Cabin crew, prepare for arrival." But no one was thinking about landing. Not really. The teenager who had live-streamed the jokes now whispered frantically into his phone, trying to log out of every platform he owned. One row behind him, his father scrolled through news alerts with growing horror. One headline read, "Exclusive, Flight 317, a national shame unfolds at 36,000 feet." Another, "Hero of Glenridge humiliated by airline passengers." Then, the final blow. Civil rights attorney confirms lawsuit against airline. Passengers identified and named. On the seatback screen, the flight map blinked. ETA to JFK, 18 minutes. But time had already run out. Every second now carried consequences. The phone of the man who tweeted first vibrated again. CNN had replied. So had the office of the state attorney general. And then, so had Jordan's guardian. A single message read, "He's not just a survivor. He's a voice we promised to protect. And we will." Behind them all, in seat 27E, Jordan still hadn't moved. But something in the way he sat was different now. The plane touched down at JFK with a jolt that felt sharper than turbulence, like the earth itself was reminding them what consequences felt like. As the wheels screeched against the tarmac and the cabin tilted forward under the weight of deceleration, the passengers on Flight 317 began to sit straighter, breathe shallower, and check their phones with frantic urgency. There was no post-flight chatter, no light jokes about the weather, no casual gathering of carry-ons. Instead, there was the quiet of people preparing to be named, judged, and punished. The intercom chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York City. Please remain seated as we arrive at our gate. We have a brief delay due to security coordination. Thank you for your patience." The words were calm, neutral, but everyone on board knew what they meant. Security coordination wasn't for safety, it was for scrutiny. Through the windows, blue lights danced. Not the flashing red of an emergency, but the solid, steady glow of authority. 2 black SUVs idled near the jet bridge. One bore the seal of the Department of Justice. The other belonged to the New York Attorney General's office. A third vehicle waited further back, its windows tinted, its driver wearing a navy suit with a gold U.N. pin on his lapel. Back inside the cabin, the air thickened with dread. The teenager who had live-streamed Jordan leaned forward, face pale, whispering to his friend, "Do you think they'll arrest us?" The friend didn't answer. He was staring blankly at his phone, which now read, "Account suspended due to violation of community standards." 2 rows up, The woman who had complained about Jordan's box began rummaging through her purse with trembling hands, pulling out lipstick, receipts, anything to avoid eye contact. Across from her, the man who had said they'll let anyone on board now sat rigid, staring at the tray table like it might offer an escape route. The flight crew received a message through their cabin comms. One flight attendant read it and immediately froze. Then she turned to the crew lead and whispered, "They want a list of every crew member who interacted with him." "Which passenger?" the lead asked. The attendant didn't have to answer. Her eyes drifted toward row 27E. Jordan sat exactly as before. He hadn't spoken since Philadelphia, hadn't moved. The box still rested in his lap. But now, as the plane pulled into the gate and the jet bridge connected with a dull mechanical hiss, he lifted his eyes. He didn't look angry. He didn't look afraid. He looked ready. The seatbelt sign went off. No one moved. "All passengers please remain seated," the flight attendant announced, but it wasn't necessary. No one dared stand. Then came the footsteps. 4 agents boarded the plane, 2 in suits, 2 in plain black uniforms with shoulder badges and earpieces. One held a clipboard. Another held a tablet. "We're looking for the following individuals," the lead agent said calmly. "Seats 7C, 8B, 11D, and 14A. You are required to disembark with us immediately for formal statements." 4 passengers stood slowly. Among them, the boy who had filmed Jordan, the girl who had called him a freak, the woman who had tried to have his box removed, and the man who had made racial jokes. They all looked as if they were about to be executed. No one clapped. No one cheered. Only silence followed as they were led down the aisle, one by one, each passing by row 27 with stolen glances they couldn't hold for long. Jordan didn't look up. He didn't need to. Their footsteps faded behind the closing of the cabin door. Another agent approached Jordan's row and knelt down to his level. "Mr. Miles," the agent said respectfully, "we're ready for you now. There's someone waiting at the gate." Jordan finally stood. He placed the wooden box carefully into his backpack, zipped it halfway, and slung the strap over his shoulder. The entire cabin watched as he walked down the aisle, not with vengeance, not with pride, but with something colder, clarity. As he reached the front, the captain himself stepped aside. "You have our apologies, son," he said, eyes low. Jordan nodded once, not in forgiveness, but acknowledgement. He stepped out into the jet bridge. Flashbulbs greeted him like lightning. Dozens of reporters, microphones, cameras. None of it made him flinch. Behind them stood a woman in a gray suit, clipboard in hand, flanked by federal escorts. "Mr. Miles, I'm with the Department of Youth Civil Rights," she said. "This won't happen again." Further back, the teenager who had filmed him was being ushered into a van, his face already on 3 live streams. Inside the terminal, monitors played breaking news. Nation reacts to airline humiliation of school shooting survivor, and passengers face legal action in viral flight incident. The chamber of the United Nations Youth Assembly was unlike anything Jordan had ever walked into. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, like it held the weight of a sky he had never been invited beneath. Flags of every nation lined the walls, but they didn't matter to him. What mattered was the silence that fell when he stepped onto the stage. A sea of faces stared at him, thousands in the room and millions more watching across the world, all waiting for the same thing. The words of the boy who hadn't spoken through humiliation, who hadn't screamed through injustice, who had taken every insult and simply sat with it. Now, they wanted to hear him speak. A moderator read from the podium. "Please welcome, representing the victims and survivors of the Glenridge Middle School shooting, Mr. Jordan Miles." There was applause. Not wild, not theatrical, just long, steady, and respectful. Jordan approached the microphone slowly, his shoulders square, his backpack slung across one arm. He didn't adjust his collar. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't need to. When the room grew quiet again, he looked up, not at anyone in particular, but beyond them all, as if speaking to a version of himself that hadn't made it here. Then he began. 3 months ago, I sat in a classroom while the people I loved most in the world were taken from me in under 8 minutes. His voice was even, clear. We were kids. Some of us had just learned fractions. Some of us had just gotten braces. We were planning Halloween costumes, field trips. My sister was planning to dye her hair purple. He paused. They told me I was lucky to survive, lucky to be the only one left. But I don't feel lucky. I feel hollow, because every day since that morning, I've had to carry what they didn't live long enough to explain. The crowd was completely still. I thought nothing could hurt more than losing her. I thought the worst day of my life ended in that hallway. His fingers curled slightly around the edge of the podium. I was wrong. Cameras zoomed in. Journalists leaned forward. Jordan continued. A few nights ago, I boarded a plane. I had a seat in first class. Not because I'm rich, not because someone pulled strings, but because I was invited to speak here at this very conference, to represent kids like me who are still trying to figure out how to live in a world that keeps trying to erase us. He didn't raise his voice, but somehow it grew louder. I showed my ticket. I followed every rule. I said please. I said thank you. But none of that mattered, because someone looked at me and saw a problem. Not a person, not a kid, just a disruption in their routine, a mistake. He turned his gaze across the room now. His voice didn't tremble. So they took my seat. They took my space. They took my voice. And the rest of the plane? They watched. They laughed. Some filmed it. Others pretended they didn't see. The crowd began to shift uncomfortably. Jordan didn't flinch. It wasn't the seat that broke me. It was what they believed about me before I said a single word. That I didn't belong. That I didn't earn it. That grief didn't come with a boarding pass. A pause. But here's the thing. You can take my seat. You can ignore my story. You can even try to shame me in front of strangers. His next words dropped like stone. But I'm still here. The words echoed. I'm still here, he repeated. Not because of pity. Not because of headlines. But because someone has to stand where they tried to bury silence. And speak. Then, softly, he reached into his backpack and pulled out the wooden box. He placed it gently on the podium. This is Maya, he said. She didn't get to sit in 2A. She didn't get to speak here. But she matters. And every word I say now, every second of breath, is shared with her. No one moved. No one blinked. You asked me here to speak for survivors. But I'm not just speaking for the ones who lived. I'm speaking for the ones who were erased on camera, in classrooms, and on airplanes. I'm speaking for the quiet ones, the angry ones, the numb ones. Then, for the first time, his voice cracked, but only slightly. You can tell a lot about a world by how it treats its children. And right now, he looked directly into the camera. We're not okay. The room stayed silent for a full 10 seconds after he stopped. Then, slowly, one person rose to their feet, then another, and another, until the entire hall stood. No one clapped. Not at first. They just stood there, witnesses to something that wasn't a performance, but a reckoning. Then the applause came, not like thunder, but like truth breaking through marble. After the applause faded, after the lights dimmed, after the cameras were turned off and the broadcast went to black, the world did not return to normal. Something had shifted. Not with a revolution, not with a riot, but with a sentence spoken by a child who refused to be erased. Within 24 hours, Jordan Miles' speech had been streamed over 90 million times across every continent. Subtitles in 39 languages followed. His face appeared on newspaper covers in cities he'd never heard of. But Jordan did not do interviews. He did not sign with publishers. He did not accept endorsements. When a corporate brand offered him a 7-figure deal to become their ambassador for resilience, he said no. When a tech billionaire asked to fund a scholarship in Maya's name, he replied, "You can't buy back what you ignored." Instead, Jordan returned home. Quietly. He enrolled in a public school under a different last name. He kept his hoodie. He kept the box. He kept the silence. But now it was on his terms. Meanwhile, the world began to reckon. The airline issued 5 public apologies over the course of a week, each more desperate than the last. Their CEO stepped down after the board received a petition signed by over 11 million people. The 4 passengers escorted off the plane were banned from flying on any domestic carrier for life. One of them lost their college admission after the university cited ethical incompatibility with our institutional values. Another faced a civil lawsuit for online harassment after screenshots of their live stream surfaced during Jordan's testimony. The lead flight attendant was terminated, then later subpoenaed. The union tried to defend her. They failed. During a televised hearing, a senator read aloud the words from Jordan's napkin, the ones a flight attendant had thrown away. A janitor had found it at JFK, unfolded it, and posted it online with the caption, the note they tried to throw out. We're not letting it happen again. The napkin now rests in a museum, creased, smudged, but preserved. They placed it in a glass case beside Maya's school ID. It's titled, The Price of Silence. In schools across the country, new protocols were created for students traveling alone. A rule now known unofficially as the Jordan Clause mandates that all children, regardless of background, be treated as priority passengers in airline systems, no longer as exceptions, but as the standard. A documentary premiered the following spring. It was not flashy. It had no dramatic score. It was simply called 2A. The final scene showed a photo of Jordan and Maya in their Halloween costumes, standing outside their school, both grinning with paint on their faces. No narration followed, just silence, and then a fade to black. Jordan watched it once, alone. Then he turned off the screen and went outside. He never liked being indoors too long anymore. He volunteered at a trauma center twice a week, talking with other kids who had been silenced in other ways. He never introduced himself with his full name. Most of them knew anyway. He always sat in the back of the group, and when asked how he wanted to be addressed, he said, just Jordan. In the years that followed, the hashtag faded, the headlines changed, and the next tragedy took over. But something stayed. A seat on every domestic flight, always 2A, was left unbooked, marked reserved in honor. No one touched it, not even airline staff. It became a symbol, not of tragedy, but of memory, of a voice that spoke when no one else did. A new school in Oakland was built and named Miles Academy for Youth Justice. The motto above its door read, still here. And as for Jordan, he continued to live, not as a celebrity, not as a martyr, but as a boy who had learned the weight of being seen too late. He smiled sometimes. He laughed sometimes. But he never boarded a plane again. Not because he was afraid, but because he had already gone further than most would ever understand. And when people asked him what he remembered most about that day in row 27E, he never mentioned the box, or the tray, or even the silence. He always said the same thing. It was the moment they realized I had a name. That was the final price. The end. If this story hit you even a little, drop a like. It helps more than you think. Subscribe if you want more stories that don't just entertain, but leave something behind. And hey, where are you watching from? What part hit you the hardest? Let me know in the comments. I read every one.